All right, so first, just again, this is like been one of those bucket list things for me. Sorry, let me just get out of here. It's one of those things where, I mean, I don't know what's the age in this room, but I remember when I went to Cal State Fullerton, the NSCA was like the organization that I was always pumped to attend these types of things, the NAT conference, and like to be on stage. I remember being in these seats and like, man, that would be a dream. So I finally got to do it. So this is kind of really exciting for me. Been working really hard with this. But first, I do want to thank Whitney, because putting something like this together, if you guys don't know, on the back end, this is a lot of work. So can we just give it I know she'll get an applause at the end, but can we do one right now? So a lot of work goes into this. And again, as a speaker now, I take this extremely serious, because I remember, this is not a cheap thing. It's an investment in your time and your money. So as a speaker, I think it's our obligation to make sure we give you guys a great experience. We make you think a little bit. One of the things that you'll notice when I'm up here is I'm not going to necessarily give you answers to everything, right? It's more about making you think. And I think for me, I remember especially in grad school, that's what grad school is all about, right? It's not so much about providing you the exact answer to an issue or to a problem that you're trying to solve, but it's to allow you to think and to teach you how to think, whether that's going and doing a literature review or going and doing talking to people in the field. It's about that thinking aspect, right? So that's what this presentation is going to be more about. So I know when I came to these, I'm like, all right, what's kind of what the speakers were talking about before? It's like, all right, he's going to give us all the answers. And it's like, that's not how it works, right? Again, being in this field for about 13 years, and I'll talk about my experience with boxers where it's the complete opposite, right? You got to sometimes think on the go. You got to be very practical. Whatever the textbook says, a lot of times that's not what you're going to be out in the field, right? You're not going to have the equipment. In my case, from a boxing perspective, maybe that culture is different, right? So things like that. So something before we get started, just again, be open-minded, and we'll touch base on that a little bit. Okay, so really quick, and I'm gonna get you guys involved with this talk a little bit. So anybody know who this is? Who? All right, Einstein, right? So in 1942, after giving a physics exam to his students, his TA, after grading, he's like, wait, hey, Dr. Einstein, you gave this exact same quiz or exam a year ago to the exact same students. And he's like, yeah, you're correct. He's like, why? And Dr. Einstein's like, well, because the answers have changed, right? So does that have the answers changed in our field? Yes, no? Right? So they've evolved, right? So I think it's having that mental aspect or just that thinking along the lines of we're evolving, and it's okay. The questions might be the same, right? In this case, it might be what was the best way to condition an athlete, your personal training client. The question's still the same, but has the answer changed, right? So sometimes we get that mixed up, right? We want to change the question and keep the same answer. Right? And that's not evolving. So what was quote unquote true back in 2009 is it still true today, right? Whether that's nutrition, supplements, training principles, and things like that, right? So I remember, back in 2009, I worked at 24-Hour Fitness, and I gave a little mini clinic at the gym about how important, no matter what you do, as soon as you get out of this gym, you got that 30-minute nutrient timing window, right? Who didn't tell their clients that, hey, bring your protein shake to the gym, get your carbs, get your glycogen resynthesized, get your protein. It's that important, right? But again, it's like maybe that's what research led us to believe, and it's not that it's completely untrue, because it's all context specific. If I'm working with an athlete multiple days or multiple training sessions a day, probably gonna need that. But your typical personal training client probably don't need to, 30 minutes, you have to get these nutrients in, right? So again, is that, something to think about. What has got you here will no longer get you there, right? Whether that's results, right? If your personal training clients or your athletes continue to lift the same amount of weight, plateau, right? as you as coaches, as practitioners, if you continue to do the same thing, you're not going to get better results, right? So something to think about. And if you want to have results you've never had, you have to do things you've never done, right? And again, I'm trying to relate this to conditioning because I'm gonna talk about some things that I'm purposely guilty of. If I'm hearing somebody speak, kind of the slides that I put together probably 5-10 years ago, I'm like, I don't believe any of it, right? And it's going back to kind of what the speakers before talked about, is having that ego and just kind of knowing, you thinking you know everything, but it's like you got to evolve, right? So again, a little history about me. So again, the title is like conditioning, often neglected, often misunderstood, right? And I'm 100% guilty of both of them, neglecting it and misunderstanding it. Right. I remember, again, I'm 33 now, been training clients for quite some time, and I'm still learning. I mean, even putting together this research, there are some things that I believed, and then I did a little literature review, and it opened up my perspective on that topic. Right. So that's me with two of my professional boxers. Been with them a little over 3 years now, from completely turning pro. Cool part, the guy above, he's going to be fighting as a main event on Showtime, September 20th. So if you have Showtime, keep an eye on him. We'll be out in Texas. So pretty cool. But that's not the end-all be-all. Right? Who trains athletes? Who also trains personal training clients? Just general pop. Right? So I've owned a gym for 5 years. We train athletes, but we also train general pop. So it's rare that unless you're in a university setting that you're not going to train general population clients. So it's like, I love training athletes, but I also love training just people that are trying to get healthy, right? And I'll share a story in a sec. So again, just really quick, actually going back to that. So again, just a quick brief history. Cal State Fullerton, owned the gym for 5 years. We have amazing coaches. I got two of them here. I got one. Coach just talked about Jen being his intern, but she was my intern first. So whatever she does with this facility, I'll take some credit from that. Okay. So, but that's kind of my brief story. And let's move on. So the question you got to ask, especially I think with conditioning, because again, I think a lot of us who do this, we focus a lot on the strength and power and we forget about the conditioning. I mean, who's guilty of that? Be honest. Right? I still do it, right? I still favor some other strength and power because it's cool stuff. To me, it's a little easier to understand. It's easier to program. Conditioning kind of is kind of the wild west at times, but it starts with this question: are you curious? If you're not curious about something, you're not going to learn it, and you're definitely not going to like go the extra mile to want to learn this stuff. Or, come to a conference, and if you're not curious, so I think you got to ask that question: are you even curious about getting better with learning conditioning? Right? I think depending on the school, that might be a spot that maybe we go over a quick chapter where we spend most of our time in the strength and power aspect development. Right? So it starts with that. Are you curious? And this is kind of tying into kind of cognitive biases. So if you follow me on social media, I love behavioral psychology. It's something that just learning about why we make decisions. And a cognitive bias is just basically like it's a type of error in thinking that occurs when people are processing and interpreting information in the world around them, right? We all have them. This is a human nature. This is a human aspect. So if you deny it, you're denying that you're a human, right? You just have to be aware of it. And again, going back to what the presenters before me said, is that self-awareness aspect. You got to know this is happening, right? And I'll show you kind of how this ties into the topic in a second. But they often lead to errors in thinking, right? And context is very important, right? And here's like a lot of, when it comes to conditioning, it comes down to this. The confirmation bias is our beliefs are often based on paying attention to the information that upholds them while at the same time tending to ignore information that challenges them, right? We, again, guilty, right, is high intensity. High intensity is the cure for everything, whether it's our personal training clients, our athletes. If it's not hard, then it's not worth doing. Right? So, and it's because we tend to see, all right, we look at all these research papers that show high intensity gives great results, whether that's your conditioning, fat loss, whatever it is, yet we tend to neglect a lot of the evidence that shows that maybe there's some other stuff that shows that also, steady state exercise can also get those benefits, if not even maybe better benefits, right? So you have to be aware of this stuff. If you're not aware that this is happening, I'm telling you, every single person in this room, this is happening, right? You have to be aware of it, and then that goes back to challenging your beliefs, right? When I was, again, going back to this presentation, there's some things that I thought they were true until I did that literature review, and it's like, all right, not as black and white as I thought, right? So I think this is really important, especially with conditioning, and again, leading into something. And this is a cool illustration. So there's a thing called echo chambers, right? It's easy to look at, think of politics, think of religion and things like that, but it's a cool illustration as far as like, all right, we have all these different opinions at the top, and then social media, we only follow the people we agree with, we only watch the YouTube videos that people agree with, we only watch TV networks that we only agree with, it gets filtered out, and then the only thing you're left with is content you already agree with, right? And this is going back to that confirmation bias, is you got to challenge your beliefs, conditioning included, if not even more so, because there's a lot of things that you might sit here right now, and again, I challenge you to even challenge me on some things that I'm maybe going to present, and I'm okay with it, because it's all about learning, but I just there's the reason I put this stuff up here is just, you have to be open-minded and curious to the content that I'm going to be talking about. If you dismiss it off the bat, then you're already going against that, or you're going with that confirmation bias, right? Whatever you know about conditioning, it's fine, but just be open to what's up here, right? And look it up yourself. Don't ever just believe someone because they have some letters behind their name. Okay, actually, yeah. So let's start off, and everyone probably knows Brett Bartholomew is getting that buy-in, and to me, I just think buy-in is just belief, right? Are you getting buy-in from your clients? And it starts with education, right? Who's ever heard that statement? I hate conditioning, right? Personal training clients, they hate it, all right? Because they really don't know what it is, but they hate it, right? They hear the word we're going to do conditioning, say, oh man, I want to lift weights. So it's like, it starts with what is conditioning and educating your clients that conditioning is not just smashing them through the wall, making them feel like crap, and making them super sore and things like that. So if you want to get that buy-in when it comes to conditioning your athletes, your clients, even athletes, right? They might think, I don't want to condition today because I got a big event tomorrow. And if you educate them that, hey, today's conditioning, but it's not what you think, you get that buy-in, and that allows you to program more effectively for your clients. Setting them up for success. Again, starts with getting them results, right? Making sure you have, and they're improving, making sure you have some objective measurements. Again, I'm a business owner, 5 years, and the only way you're going to get people to buy more sessions, more training from you, is if you're getting them results and you're able to show the results objectively, right? You can't just say you look better. It's like, no, you lost X amount of inches. You increase your strength on X amount of exercises, right? You improve your speed. So again, this is, for those of you, let me ask that. Who's in the private sector? And then again, university, high school, things like that? Okay, so almost half an hour, but the private sector is so different. The university, kids got to show up. Private sector, you gotta earn your money. You got to get people to come back and like you, right? So you better have some measurements, and it's also with conditioning. And that's kind of going into what we forget about the conditioning aspect is we have measurements for strength, power. That's great. We're measuring bar speed, but we're not measuring anything with conditioning, right? And if you're in the private sector, it's another way. Well, let's just say maybe they don't get the results that they want, but they improve their heart rate recovery. That's a win. That means they're probably going to stick around with you a little bit longer. All right? And one of our main things is always do no harm. So again, going back to conditioning is, are you just drilling your clients every single session without actually thinking, and you're actually doing more harm than anything else, right? So really, really important there. So again, I think going back to the growth mindset, right? So actually, before that, so I want everybody's hand to go up in the air. This is just a little participation. So I want you to lower your hand. I need you to be honest. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Lower your hand as soon as you don't agree with one of the statements. Okay? High intensity interval training is not the answer for everything. Okay? Haven't lost anybody. Building up your aerobic system is not just about doing road work or distance running. Okay? Still nobody. Not everyone hates cardio. Ooh, I knew I was going to lose somebody. All right, I lost a few, okay? So, endurance exercise will not eat up all your gains. Lost a few. Okay, so I got this one from someone I highly respect, Mike Robertson. A smart program will build an aerobic foundation and then mix in high intensity and low intensity over time to build a resilient and well-conditioned athlete. Okay, so some of these statements are, sometimes it's like, I think the statement is not, everyone hates cardio, right? We all think that, yet have you asked your clients, right? Maybe they actually like it, but you just have this kind of confirmation bias that, all your other clients probably hate cardio, so you're using that confirmation bias and you're just applying it to, Susie, who actually enjoys her 45 minutes on the elliptical. No matter, we might think that that's boring to us, but that's probably a stress reliever for her, right? So again, it's challenging your beliefs. Why not ask your clients, hey, do you enjoy cardio? Do you like, instead of always doing high intensity intervals, do you actually enjoy doing, steady state? And they might tell you yes, and you've been programming nothing but intervals for them because that's what you thought they liked, right? So again, going back to that confirmation bias. Okay, so we're going to start off with context, right? Context, especially with conditioning, is king, right? So with those of you that don't follow football or do follow football, two distinct teams, right? So we got to ask the question, two football teams, two college level teams, high level performance athletes, and do their styles of conditioning, are they different? Those of you that follow football, yes, no? Why? Whoever said yes, why? Yeah, so hurry up tempo, more pro style type of offense, right? They're going to try to move the ball as quickly as possible. They're going to huddle up, break, and then go. So their conditioning is going to be different, right? Probably much more aerobically driven versus much more can maintain your power over a given amount of time with X amount of rest periods, right? Instead of a one size fits all, you got to make sure you're in the right context. Okay? So again, and then next thing is consistency over intensity, right? And that might challenge something that you may believe right now. You might be, right, as soon as I pop this up, you're like, no, intensity, right? But be open to it. It's with anything, right? With personal development, with success with school, with training your clients, it's consistency. If they hate something and you continue programming it, they're not going to be consistent, right? Oop. So we're almost to the actual conditioning stuff, I know. So hopefully I'm not losing anyone. But does anyone know about what this means? Who is this? Huh? Sisyphus. Can you really quickly sum up maybe what it's about?
He was cursed to roll a boulder up the hill, and just as he approached the top,
Nice. All right, so for answering that, you got yourself a heart rate monitor, okay? So it's a $150 value right there. So come see me afterwards, okay? So you didn't think you're gonna get a heart rate monitor today, did you? Some of you who were like, I know, but I don't want to answer. You just missed out. Always participate. So really quick story is it comes from Greek mythology. He was the main person, and he ended up doing some bad stuff. And his punishment was, all right, for the rest of eternity, you're gonna have to push this heavy boulder up the hill. And as soon as it gets to the top, it rolls back down automatically, and he had to do that for life. So he was very consistent, right? He had to be. Okay, so what's the goal when we're talking about conditioning? Is this the goal? Are you going from one sport to another? And, the rounds, right? I work with professional boxers. How many rounds you're fighting, right? MMA and boxing, very different. Do you use the same conditioning methods that gave you success for one sport and you're not using a different one for the next? That might happen. Secondly, is this the goal, right? Maybe the game is tied at the end and you got to take that PK. You got to be able to deliver a lot of high power output at the end of the game, maybe the last sprint. In this case, maybe it's a PK that if you hit it just a little softer and it doesn't have as much velocity, you may not make the goal, right? Or is this the goal? Right? It's being able to live healthy, play with your grandchild or granddaughter, and be able to be independent. So I think it starts with when you're programming conditioning is what's the goal? You have to answer that question. Right? It's like your strength and training and strength and power program, right? You guys always and girls always answer what's the goal? Hypertrophy, strength, power development, what is it? And yet we fail to do that with conditioning. Right? What's the goal? So when it comes to conditioning, you have to understand that it's a skill, right? It's not just a thing you do at the end of your workouts. It's actual skill, right? And those of you that are probably endurance athletes, you know, us in the strength and power world, we probably just think, oh, you guys just run road work and there's no technique. You just do a lot of volume, right? But it's actual skill when it comes to conditioning. I work with boxers, and the story here is when it comes to boxing, like I was training a high-level elite endurance athlete, right? And she had the World Guinness World Record for the youngest Latina to 100 marathons. Amazing cardio, amazing endurance. We're doing some personal training. And for one of her like recovery days, we did some boxing, some mitt work. And she was gassing out, like gassing out. She couldn't maintain 2 minutes of, you know, steady state punching, relax. And it's why, because it's, again, context. She was great in one sport. It didn't carry over. Why was that happening? Is if you talk to people that spar, is because they have bad technique, right? So she might be very fit, but she's really tied up top when she's trying to hit these mitt work. She's overthinking things that's causing her to use more energy, right? So you have to understand that you can, just by improving technique, you know, running technique, you're going to get more efficient. You're going to improve your conditioning, right? Improve your breathing, right? A lot of times people hold their breath. They're not breathing correctly. So that's another skill that if you want to improve your conditioning, it's not just, you know, program all these crazy workouts. Improve their technique, improve their breathing, improve their recovery, right? Overtraining, you know, having some active rest days. So recovery is also going to make an impact on their conditioning. Improve their capacity, or you can improve their rate. So these are all skills that can be trained. And again, it's going back to that buy-in of you can improve on all these skills and get better without just hammering clients. So it's a skill that, oh, I'm going backwards. So again, one of the things that I've learned in the past maybe 3 years, since I've been working with boxers, I've changed my training philosophy when it comes to conditioning. And this is kind of where I'm at, is it's aerobically driven. And you must take a individualized approach, and it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? I remember when I would play baseball in high school, I was a little heavier at the time, and our coach would send us out for some runs. He's like, this is a light run, really easy run. But the problem was our, you know, skinnier guys, our fitter guys were in the front. They were the ones leading. For them, it was an easy run. For me, it was high intensity. Right? So the coach just thought, oh, it's an easy run, but it's not individualized, right? My heart rate was probably in the 90s. Their heart rate was probably in the 60s. So if you're doing that in a team setting and you're not individualizing, you may think this is an aerobic workout when in fact, a couple people over there are probably high intensity, a couple moderate intensity, a couple recovery. Now it's not an aerobically driven workout, right? We're training in a different system. So that's where individualization comes in, and that's kind of where it leads us to this. So has anyone read Be a Purple Cow by Seth Godin? Yeah? So what's the premise that you got?
Just stand out.
Yeah, stand out, be different, right? Do what others are not doing, right? That's how you get, you know, attention. That's how you get recognition, is you're not just following the herd. And I wasn't going to talk about this, but did everybody know that Instagram post that was going around? If you don't post it, you're going to go, right? I didn't post it, but a lot of people posted it, and it's because there's a cognitive bias that's called herd behavior, right? You do it because you're scared that, like, if I don't post it and you see everyone else posting it, so it leads you to make an irrational decision, right? So again, going back to being the purple cow is more about just don't follow the herd sometimes, almost probably all the time. Most of the time, the herd is just making those decisions very irrationally because everyone's doing it, right? So hopefully nobody posted that. If you did, it's okay. Okay? So where are we missing the mark when it comes to conditioning, right? So let's get a little bit, maybe a few of you, just what do you think are the difficulties that's going on in your guys' training as far as conditioning? Any difficulties that stand out?
I don't think conditioning is periodized enough like a lot of weight training is.
Yeah.
In weight training, we obviously go like hypertrophy and then strength and power, etc.
Yep.
A lot of times we focus, well, this sport does this energy system, and we never train outside of that energy system for that sport.
Yep. So periodization, right? We all do with strength and power, yet with conditioning, it's all right, what are your work to rest ratios? Let's just do that all year long. Versus, hey, there's some time in the off season, some in season, and so on. Yep.
First and foremost, I agree with what he said. And then the second thing I come across is being able to plug it in with all the amount of work that their sport coaches do or their boxing coaches do.
Yeah.
They're always spending so much time in high intensity workloads.
Yeah, and again, that comes down to, I think, education, right? Teaching maybe the sport coach, hey, this is what's going on with this athlete, and how can we program, how can we make a little time for some other stuff. But yeah, a great one. Yeah.
I think changing the mindset of patients or clients, patients, about spending specific time in a lower intensity or a moderate intensity, and
Yeah.
gradually, again, periodizing and
Yeah.
increasing in time,
And-
and then buy in and understand that there's a process behind it.
Changing variables, right? Changing variables, sets, reps, all that stuff. We do that with the weight room stuff. Yeah, with the conditioning, it's kind of, again, wild, wild west. Right? So being able to manipulate those variables to the best suits for that time of the year or that training period, training block. Okay? So what intensity is he at, right? We can probably guess, based off of his 1 rep max, we can probably tell, based off of what's on the bar, what's the intensity. What intensity is she at? We have no clue, right? Again, let's just say she's not wearing a heart rate monitor, we have no clue, right? She can give us a RPE scale, give us a little guesstimate, but we're not doing that with the bench press. We know exactly how much weight. We're even putting units on there that are measuring the velocity of the bar movement. Yeah, we're not doing it with our athletes when it comes to conditioning, right? So there's a gap there. So going back to taking an individualized approach. One of the best investments as a gym owner, now we have kind of that system in our gym. With my clients, especially my boxing athletes, it keeps them in check. When I tell them it's a recovery day, they can't go past, and I can see their workouts as soon as they're done. I can see if they're out of their zone. So boxing mentality is, it's the old school. If you've never worked with a boxer, it's probably the hardest sport to convince them what we do is it brings value to them. Right? They're old school, hard, beat them up, forget the periodization, every day, every week is hard. But with those heart rate monitors, I can give my guys and girls hey, you're gonna stick to 60 to 75%, that's it. And if they don't, I can call them out and go, hey, you're not sticking to the program. So it's an easy way to be very objective. And one of the best investments from a personal training perspective, some of my coaches are in here, my clients love it, right? One, it allows them to kind of earn these points. It allows them to compete. They earn medals. So when it comes to adherence, their outlook on conditioning, they don't look at it as horrible anymore because it becomes a game. It becomes they're earning these medals and they feel a little recognition and things like that. And then results in performance / recovery. I think going back to that recovery is being able to program your recovery days and they have something to measure versus just hey, don't go hard today. We don't know, objectively, we don't know what that means. And especially your clients, who have no background in exercise science, they have no idea what that means. They might be going too easy and then it works against you. It's not even a recovery day. Okay, so going back, again, I didn't want to spend too much time on this because I'm kind of under assumption that you guys can kind of understand this. I wanted to be very practical, but just the big takeaway when it comes to energy system development is understanding this. I remember when I was in undergrad, I thought when I learned this, that one system turns on, that one's off, this one's on, that one's off, and then this one's on. I just thought there was a percentage at your heart rate that system's gone, and then the next one turns on, right? But you have to understand that they're all going at the same time. And even think of lactate, you're producing lactate as we speak, as you're sitting here, right? Everyone just thinks, oh, we don't produce lactate unless we're going hard and we're in that glycolysis, right? So they're all turned on at the same time. That's if you can understand that, it makes things a lot easier. As far as kind of the energy systems, this is, again, you can find all this info, but just look at it as the phosphagen system, the ATP, a lot of power, low capacity, and it just kind of inverses as we go down. This is the fuels that we use, but again, very broad, but you guys pretty much kind of understand this a little bit already. Right, so in the next few, 10, 15 minutes, my goal is to convince you that we got to train the aerobic system. So that's my goal. And so hopefully, at least when you walk out of this talk, you're a little bit more open to it. You're a little bit more, you have that buy-in, both from, I got some evidence to support it, but also some practical examples, right? So let's start off with this. I think when I learn things, again, I've been into the past 3 years, the behavioral psychology. I've shifted so much of my reading, my personal development into why we make decisions. And the way in the beginning it was a really tough topic for me to understand until I started learning about the brain science. To me, I'm the type of person where if you can tell me when I learn something, it goes to this part of the brain and then it goes this part of the brain, it's a lot easier for me to understand. And it's the same thing when it comes to this. If you can kind of understand what happens at the heart, what happens at the peripherals, for me, it's a lot easier to understand. So we're going to kind of start with this because I think this is one of the most important aspects to understanding kind of conditioning in a sense, right? So cardiac output, total quantity of blood ejected by the heart and measures in liters per minute. So another question. It's two variables that are included in cardiac output. Oop. Huh?
Heart monitor. Stroke volume.
Stroke volume. Okay, so look at that. So heart rate times stroke volume, right? I don't have any more heart rates, man. Sorry. Right? So we have two equations. Again, I think a lot of times we only focus on raising the heart rate versus enhancing the stroke volume, right? And the stroke volume is just basically when the heart ejects all the blood, when it fills with blood, it needs to expand, right? It's the Frank-Starling law, right? Two things going on there to produce how much blood you're ejecting every minute, right? So what happens with exercise to these two variables, right? Heart rate increases to the level of intensity, right? We all kind of understand that. You work harder, heart rate's going up. What do you think happens to stroke volume? Increases and then stabilizes. Anything else? You think it decreases at any point? Huh? You got to build it. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to as we increase with intensity, stroke volume increases to a point and then tends to plateau. But I got a little asterisk on that because there's some research that I'll talk about in a second. So in general, about 40 to 60, there's research there's a gap, but anywhere from like 40 to 50, even up to 60%, as your heart rate goes up and then as your intensity gets to about 60%, your stroke volume tends to just plateau. And then the reason you have more cardiac output comes from your increase of your heart rate, right? How many times it's beating per minute. So this is something that I found. There's not tons of research, but there's a systematic review. So just kind of piling up tons of research and trying to make some type of conclusions when it comes to this topic. So if you want to look that up, you can check that little systematic review. But what they found essentially is some of the studies have shown that stroke volume tends to keep going up to a point. I mean, there's a little, but it's not going to just skyrocket as your heart rate, but it does tend to go up. There's a lot of evidence that it plateaus, and there's some evidence that it can decrease. Yeah.
Cardiac drift.
What was that?
Cardiac drift.
Cardiac what?
Drift.
Drift. What's that? I've found that term but what's that referring to?
The fact that it's not a linear increase, that there is the plateau.
Yeah. So that tends to happen, but there's like a caveat to that from what the researchers found, right? So one of the studies was this one, and what they found, they had two groups, low fit, high fit. You can kind of see how they categorize those two groups. And what they found when it comes to stroke volume is in the low fit group, it tended to plateau, right? Almost every single time plateau, or there's maybe a few subjects that actually decreased as they were increasing intensity. Now, what they found with the highly fit individuals, according to that VO2, that it kept going up, right? Not to like skyrocket, but it didn't plateau where the most unfit or the low fit people plateaued at, right? So it's an argument for why being fit can help you with your cardiac output, right? Because we can enhance that stroke volume a little bit more than being unfit. And again, category, we're talking about VO2 maxes. That's how they define it. So one argument is, can we just lift weights? Right? Can we, again, I've wear my heart rate monitor when I work out with weights as well. I have my clients wear it. I just tell them, hey, I usually use it for their rest periods. I don't care how high their heart rate is going when they're doing curls and squats and deadlifts. That's not the goal. But that's what a lot of people think. They think, well, I'm increasing my heart rate with weight training. Aren't I getting the same benefits as, others, as running for 30 minutes? Right? So when it comes to like your typical steady state cardio type stuff, so heart rate has a very linear relationship with VO2 max, right? The more fit you get, higher your VO2 max goes, right? During cardiovascular training, but not resistance training. That linear, even though your heart rate goes up, it's not the same, right? The reason is because during cardiovascular activity, the demand for oxygen is increased, so your heart rate goes up, But when you're weight training, the reason your heart rate goes up is because of catecholamines, right? Adrenaline. You're hyperventilating because you can't breathe, so your heart rate goes up, right? So there's no relationship when it comes to resistance training and VO2 max. That's why you wouldn't see a bodybuilder running, outpacing a marathon runner, right? That's the reason. So it's like the argument of my heart rate goes up when I'm doing weight training. That's not the argument. You can't use that argument because it's not the same. Right? The adaptations are very different. So the heart rate is not necessarily demanding more oxygen. The reason your heart rate goes up is you're getting going to failure on a rep and you're hyperventilating, your adrenaline is up, heart rate needs to go up, but it's not the same as going out and running steady state, increase your intensity a little bit, increase your intensity, now the heart rate starts to drive up because it's demanding more oxygen, right? Big difference. Now, again, going back to that, I just kind of dismissed that argument, but there's a caveat to that, right? We've all seen it, right? Which population can improve aerobic fitness, right? Their VO2. What do you think? Which population might be able to improve their VO2 max? Low fitness? Who else? Someone said it. Huh? Untrained, older, right? So, them, right? So when I work with a personal training client that's untrained, or maybe even a youth athlete, like I don't need to spend that much, probably any time doing cardio, steady state, because their resistance training they're gonna get that adaptability. They're gonna get some aerobic fitness just from lifting weights, right? So with, you have a new client, probably don't have to program tons of cardio. Changes when you become much more fit, right? So these types of clients, these types of populations, you can get away with it, but at some point, you're not going to just keep lifting weights and then your VO2 max is going to go up, right? At some point, it's going to plateau. Then you got to include some form of conditioning. So I think it starts with testing and assessing, right? I think going back to the premise of like being very objective, how can we tell that an athlete or a personal training client is getting better, right? So these are some of the things that I use. There are probably other things out there that you could probably get your hands on and use, but I'm trying to be very practical, minimal equipment. If you don't have a heart rate monitor, there's some things that you can still do. But again, going back, I highly suggest you get yourself, even if you're like a trainer, you're an independent trainer, you just need one, and then every time your client comes in, you just, make sure you maybe have a few bouts and they use the same one, but have it on hand so you can do some of these tests, right? So the first one is your max heart rate, right? Really simple test, but I think if you're gonna be using heart rate percentages, just like a 1 rep max, like you have to know what's your max heart rate, right? I think a lot of times using that Carvolin formula, whatever, 220 minus your age, for people that are fit, that's out the window, right? I have 220 minus your age. I've had some older individuals their heart rates are in the 190, 200, but according to that formula, it's like 140. Right, so make sure you test this. One thing that I love doing at our gym is the modified Cooper's test. I do have a video of this on my YouTube channel. It pinpoints everything you need to know about how to do it. It's a 6-minute test, pretty tough test. It's not like you're going all out, but it's a pretty tough test. It establishes like an aerobic threshold, right? You would have to come to a university and actually test it, and my boxers have had the privilege of coming with Whitney and Jennifer and getting their VO2 or their anaerobic threshold tested, and guess what? It literally was off by 2 points from what we did with the anaerobic threshold. So again, this is just one example. It might be off with everyone, but with my boxer, it was about plus or minus 2 points. So again, pretty reliable field measure, right? You don't have to go to university. So another test is really simple, is a resting heart rate, right? Have your clients take their resting heart rate in the morning, and we pretty much know for the most part, the lower your resting heart rate, the more fit you are, right? It's a good way to, hey, we start a program, we have 30 sessions. By the end of those 30 sessions, maybe they didn't hit their body composition goals, but the resting heart rate drop, you can give them an article and say, hey, why is this really important? Because you just told me you want to live longer, you want to play with your kids. Hey, we didn't get to the weight loss goal, but we got this, so they might, next 30 sessions, because they saw some progress. It's really simple, right? Anyone can do it. One of things the reason I use a heart rate monitor is it's one thing to make sure I'm programming correctly as far as their intensities, but this is the second one. So I know the graph is a little tough to see, but essentially a heart rate recovery is whenever we're doing an interval, instead of giving a very generic, you're taking 1 minute off of rest, I use their numbers based off how well they're recovering with their heart rate. My threshold is usually about 130. When they get to 130, whether it takes 30 seconds or a minute, we're back to the next interval. Right? So that's another way you can use that heart rate monitor, not just for the intensity, but when is the time to get to the next interval versus we're training a group, all right, 30 seconds is great for that person, and you're giving everyone a minute, but a minute is not enough for this group. It's way too much for that group. Now you're not individualizing, you're taking away some training adaptations over here, and you're taking some adaptations over here. Right? So what it is, essentially, there's two lines. The fit person is that blue one, Unfit the gray one, and this is when we stop exercising after a minute. You can see that there's a difference, right? Their heart rate recovery, how well they're able to drop their heart rate within that minute. I usually do a 30-second and a minute as far as their testing goes, but the research is there with both. But the minute is a good gauge, and you can tell the fit person is much their rate of drop is much quicker than an unfit person, right? It takes an unfit person almost 4 minutes to get back to that 130 mark. It takes a fit person 1 minute, right? So we have two athletes, two different individuals. We're programming 1 minute for everybody. It's not enough for that unfit person, right? And again, showing progress, being very objective. That personal training that probably didn't get the weight loss results is, hey, your resting heart rate improved, your heart rate recovery improved, you're getting better. Oh my gosh, like I only thought I needed to lose weight, but I didn't know I got better with this. Where's my next package that I want to buy, right? Having these measurements is not just a performance thing, but it's showing that they're making progress. So I love this tool, and that's how I do with all my boxers, and it's been one of the best things ever. Because I get boxers that, they're, middleweights, I have some lightweights, different fitnesses, right? So I got to be able to program accordingly, yeah.
So on the heart rate recovery test, are you taking up to the max heart rate and then testing it?
Not even max heart rate, like whatever interval we're doing. We can be going 75 or maybe 80, 85%. They're usually the higher intensity intervals, and then I'm having them drop and just timing it. So that's my assessment. But I'm like, hey, once we have a screen on the TV that shows it, right, so they can see their heart rate monitors. And I'm like, go get some water. But as soon as that thing turns blue, you're back on that bike, rower, whatever they're doing. Yeah. And again, this is kind of my scale, but it's been pretty validated through some research. But if by the time you get done, if your heart rate's 180 and then after a minute you're at 160, it's considered poor. There's a 20 drop. That's not that great, right? If it's 20 in the 40s, between 20 and 40, it's pretty good. But my boxers are kind of in the high 40s, sometimes in the 50s. They're able to bring their heart rate down so quickly. And for boxing, you have a minute in between your rounds, really important. Especially on a 10, 12 round fight. Now you're using more substrates, more glycogen. You're probably going to hit the wall a lot faster if you're not able to recover your heart rate. All right. So I use that as an indicator. All right. So I'm going to try to rush through these. I know I'm going a little bit getting close. So needs analysis. We've all done them with strength and power. We got to do them with our conditioning. Right? You got to answer all these questions. I'm not going to go through them, but again, you guys will get the slides. But it's just like any needs analysis that you've ever done when it comes to strength and power. It's the same thing. Right? Work to rest ratios, injury history, what's the goal of that training block, what time of the year they're at, how much time do you have? I mean, I work with high school kids too, and we don't got that much time in the weight room. We don't have that much time. So we got to be able to prioritize what's the goal in this training block. We're going to prioritize that. So you got to be able to answer all these questions. And then what if you don't have, heart rate monitors? What do you got? Well, you teach the kids how to do it based off of checking their neck, right? You teach them that. It's not going to be perfect, but it's something, right? Okay, so when it comes to concurrent training, again, the research is kind of here and there, but I just tend to look at it like this. You prioritize what's the main goal, right? If you're in the off season and you're trying to build your aerobic base, you're not too concerned with probably their strength and power at that moment, right? If you're in the university setting, but maybe in the private sector, you might need a little bit of everything because maybe they're a year-round athlete. So if you can just get away from you're going to lose all your muscle, it's like if that's not the goal, then it's not a big deal. If you're going to lose a little bit of strength, a little power, but you're going to gain some conditioning, it's okay, because that's the goal of that training block, right? So ideal situation, you would want to split the training sessions up for the day, so you wouldn't want to stack them back to back, but that's not always practical. So if you got to do one, do the one that's a priority. So if it's condition, it's conditioning. And then just make sure you're prioritizing your actual strength work and you're bringing it down, because they're going to walk into that weight room with heavy legs. They're going to be a little tired. But again, the goal is for that training block or that training day maybe, is conditioning, right? So fatigue, we're going to go through these a little quick. Again, hopefully everyone knows, and I work with boxers. This is still around. I mean, not too long ago on HBO or Showtime, one of the persons said, oh my God, they're building up lactic acid and they're getting fatigued. So it's still around, especially in boxing. Hopefully we know lactic acid, or what is actually known as lactate, it's not even lactic acid, is not the cause of fatigue. It's a buffer, it's a fuel source, and then there's also this lactate shuttle that your fast twitch muscles can actually help your slow twitch muscles from an endurance perspective, right? So what causes, so lactate, so sometimes you'll see people measuring lactate. It's a good marker because it linearly increases with acidosis, but it's not the cause of why you're getting tired, right? These are kind of the causes, and again, I'll go through these a little quick because you're going to have these with you. So when it comes to passive versus active rest, I make it really simple. Is if you're doing some repeat sprint ability, and the goal is power output, and you're in season, then maybe have them take some passive rest. They're just sitting there, they're standing there, and just trying to recover. Because some research says if they're active, it may decrease their power output. If they're in the off season, if the goal is to enhance aerobic capacity and that type of thing, then have them do some passive stuff. Jump rope, mobility drills, core drills, calisthenics, that type of stuff. So really simple. You don't got to make it too complicated. Building a robust aerobic base. To me, it happens in the off season. So if you have a year-round sport, it happens in off season, right? You want to build that base. You want to spend the majority of your time in the off season developing that aerobic base. Now, when it comes to like detraining and endurance performance, power tends to fall off pretty quick. Strength and aerobic fitness tends to stay around. So that just tells you that, hey, it can be maintained. If you build it in the off season, you don't got to do tons of it during the season. You can at least maintain it versus just stopping, and then you're losing a lot of the adaptations. Right? So this is only if you've built that base. So I got a few minutes, so I'm going to go a little fast, and I apologize. But from a program design perspective, volume over intensity. Again, away from season, this is how we can vary the volume. And again, I apologize if you guys are taking pictures, but you'll get the slides. General over specific, right? Some really basic exercises. If you're a personal trainer and you're a strength coach in the private sector, learn how to do mitt work, because it's going to get your clients to love it. They're going to get great aerobic capacity type of adaptations, and they're going to love your training sessions. Okay, so learn how to do some basic mitt work. I highly encourage that. Now, when we shift over to intensity, this is some ways that we can adjust that, so we can vary those types of things. And then we go to specific, right? Once we get closer to the season, we're making things, work to rest ratio. We're doing these types of drills. They're going to put them in positions that are going to mimic more of the sport, right? The demands of the sport, I should say. As far as periodization, I keep it really simple. The further you are from competition, the more you can kind of quote unquote afford more conditioning / volume. And then once competition period is coming in, 2 to 3 weeks, a little taper, you start to decrease volume, maybe increase some intensity, but we don't want to get injured. Again, I work with professional athletes. If they don't make it to the ring, they don't get paid. Right? I just took a lot of money out of the pocket, and it's my fault because I got them injured, and I probably did some dumb stuff that probably didn't need to be in their program. We should have done that a lot early on. Okay, and then once you take that little taper, that's when we have that strength and power rebound, and hopefully we're peaking for competition. I'm not going to read this, but make sure you're using the minimum effective dose, because again, this is the problem with high intensity stuff, is if we do tons of high intensity stuff, right, Tabata, we get great results initially, faster than what we would do with more volume aerobic type stuff, but we're going to plateau. And then what do? Once we've already did all the high intensity, we can't go up from there. But if we build the base, increase intensity, we have so much more room to adapt and to get better at. So use the minimum effective dose where they're at. Oh, I got maybe like 2 minutes where we're winning. I'm going to try to squeeze this in. So when it comes to repeat sprint ability, it kind of depends, but here's the key. If you work with soccer athletes, you probably know this, is if they don't have that aerobic capacity, what's going to happen when they need a high-intensity bout? In this case, getting to that ball that could be the game-winning thing. If they don't have that base, their power output drops. That means they probably don't get to the ball, probably don't win the game. Right? So that's where you got to build that base, because this is going to come in handy even on those repeat sprint abilities. It's not just, all right, teach them how to be fast, because they're not 100-meter track athletes, right? They got to do this over a long period of time. This is a study if you want to look it up, but essentially what this tells you is In 2 weeks of not training, they lost their aerobic capacity. So they lost it in 2 weeks, but the cool part is they got it back in 2 weeks. So it can be detrained fairly quickly, but it can be retrained fairly quickly as well. Okay, so if you look at it from an energy perspective, energy system, think of your alactic system as increasing performance and your aerobic system as trying to reduce performance decrements, right? So this is your tank, that's your big engine. Right? That's really simple. Try to make it as simple as possible if you're trying to distinguish the two. So again, this stuff, like I don't even have to go over it because you can literally look at it and you can program. This is all program design. I'm going to tell you your heart rates, your duration, how many days a week, how to make it harder. So this stuff you don't even have to. It's going to be on your slides, but this, and you can pick from whatever exercise you want. But the key thing are these things, right? The variables that you can change are the key things when it comes to actually these types of interval training. So again, I'm going to go through this, but all this is on your slides. You pick your exercise. As long as you're meeting these, you're pretty much hitting that the adaptation, right? And this is the lactate threshold. That's something that we talked about a little bit earlier. This is just an example of what a lactate threshold session will look like. And let me see what else. So this is really quick. Last thing I'll probably finish off here is, so this is their lactate threshold. So if they're hitting that lactate threshold at 14 miles per hour running speed, right? In order for us to improve that, we got to stress that component, right? So we got to train that. So that's why knowing that number is really important, because what happens if they get better and we can shift that over to the right, now they're hitting their anaerobic threshold, lactate threshold at 15 miles per hour. That means they're getting way better. They're running faster at faster speeds, covering more distance, and they're not hitting their threshold as quickly. So that's why that's important to train that aspect. And these are just different types of training things that you can do. From a program perspective, I usually like to do about 4 to 6 blocks. So I tell myself, what's the priority for this training block? I'm going to put more of the aerobic type stuff versus the alactic type stuff. And again, it's what's the biggest window of adaptation. If they have a horrible aerobic system, stress that. If they need to get stronger and powerful, stress that, right? It's very specific. And the last thing I'll leave you with is intellectual curiosity drove Einstein to some of the world's most important discoveries. So I can leave you with that, is be curious, question things, question yourself, question people, question me. Whatever I just put up here, when you're looking at my slides, go and look at the research, and maybe you have a different interpretation of what I did. I'm okay with that. Cool? All right, we are good. So thank you. Damn, too many slides.